You all so much for joining us this evening. We're going to have a really great conversation this evening with our wonderful artists in residence and learn about the artists in residence panel. This is the second program in our 40th anniversary speaker series for Great Basin National Park. My name is Aviva O'Neill, and I'm the executive director of Great Basin National Park Foundation. We're the nonprofit partner of Great Basin National Park, and we do many things to support the national park. And to all of you out there in the audience tonight who are Great Basin Guardians, those are the people that support the park through us, through their contributions and their following us on Facebook and Instagram and reading newsletters. Thank you so much for being Great Basin Guardians, for supporting programs like this, the Artist in Residency Program, and all the other work we do for Great Basin National Park. So if you are new to us, thank you for joining us tonight, and I hope you'll choose to learn a little bit more about the foundation. You can do that on the website, and we will be sending a follow-up email after this program with some links so that you can learn more. So unfortunately, Tamara couldn't join us this evening. She's sick, so I'll be taking the role of moderator tonight. We know she'll be feeling well soon. I think she's in the audience. So thank you so much, Tamara, for all you have done to make this program a success. The outline for the evening is we'll do a little introduction, and then each of the artists will share, they'll introduce themselves and share their work and their experience at the park. And then we'll go into some questions, Q&A, where we'll start with some questions, but then we invite you to ask your questions as well. So at any time throughout the evening, if you would like to put a question in the Q&A, it's down at the bottom of your screen. There's a little box that says Q&A. Feel free to throw your question in there anytime during the program. We also, it would be fun to start the evening off with, if you want to put in the chat where you're coming from, where you're joining us tonight. Anything else you want to put in there? It's fun for us to see who's in the audience. It's always a really neat community that comes together to support this remote and special national park. So, yeah, thank you for putting stuff in the chat. Love it, love it, love it. Wonderful. So, okay, I'm going to hop into talking a little bit about the Artist in Residency Program. So for those of you who are familiar with Artist in Residency programs, those take place in many different places, but there is a long history of having artist in residency programs in national parks. This particular program that we're going to talk about tonight initially was more of a relationship between the University of Nevada, Reno and Great Basin National Park Foundation, and then it was combined with the already established Great Basin National Park residency. So, and now there's more opportunities. So basically, the residency is a perfect way for artists to connect with nature and share with others the vital importance of this beautiful environment, while also emphasizing the significance of artistic practice and creative expression. Art can so effectively encourage deeper engagement with the world around us. It can challenge our assumptions, reveal new perspectives, and in this case of the arts intersecting directly with the environment at our national park, it has the potential to expand awareness, foster conservation, and help ensure preservation. So in 2019, Great Basin National Park Foundation Vice Chair at the time was Stephen Brown, and he sparked up a conversation with Tamara Scrontz, who at the time was an associate professor of art and the director of the School of the Arts at the University of Nevada, Reno. And they talked about the potential of creating a new and unique artist in residency at Great Basin National Park that would be focused on local artists. And we decided to define local as all of Nevada and all of Utah. So basically most of the Great Basin. So when Tamara and I started talking about this and working together on this, It was literally just before the COVID pandemic took place. So we worked behind the scenes together diligently so that we could launch it in 2021, right after the pandemic settled down. And our goal was to emphasize opportunities for artists across disciplines. So we wanted to be sure to invite artists from performing arts, literary arts, and of course the visual arts. And then to have this focus on the Great Basin region. And that was so successful that we were able to really kind of professionalize the way that the artists were invited to become part of the residency program. And working with the park, we realized that it would make sense to combine what that park had already established, a Darwin Lambert residency program. And so when we combined the two together, one of the wonderful outcomes was that we ended up deciding that the park decided that they could offer 3 residencies a year with our partnership. So it went from 1 residency to then 2 that were kind of separate to 3 now opportunities each year that are through this combined collaborative. So, so joining us, like I said this evening, are 4 exceptional alumni artists. We have Meghan Dragon, who was an artist in 2025, Alina Lindquist, who was an artist in 2024, Marko Bajzer, who was an artist in 2023, and Mark Maynard, who was an artist in 2022. And they do a great job of representing those variety of disciplines, which is really fun and unique. So what we're going to do now is we're going to just go into that section of the presentation where each artist is going to introduce themselves. And I'm going to share a presentation that we've collectively put together so that you can hear directly from them and see, what their inspiration turned out to be. So I'm going to turn it over first to Marko, and let me share my screen. And let's go here. Okay, give me 1 second. I think I need to get out of the previous screen share there. Here we go. Okay, share screen. All right. And then, okay, sorry, 1 more second. I'm going to stop sharing first. I'm going to turn off. So we're each, besides the artist who's going to talk, we're each going to turn off our video. So let's try this 1 more time. Okay, share and then take it away, Marko. Let me put this on full slideshow. Okay, go ahead. Thank you, Marko.
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Marko Bajzer, and I'm an orchestral composer. And what I'm doing, and this is actually part of a series that I'm doing, but I'm writing a large symphonic work that is all about the national parks. So this was the second of that series. My first one was at Lassen Volcanic National Park. And then I was at Great Basin, and then I was at Joshua Tree, and then Voyagers, and then this summer I'm going to Glacier Bay in Alaska. And it's kind of like each of these pieces is like tells the story musically of the park, and orchestras can do just, their one favorite, or they can, put together, their favorite 2 or 3 or 4 to make a little symphony, or they can play the whole suite, which will eventually have like 8 to 10-ish. And this one was commissioned and performed by the Reno Philharmonic last March, which was a really amazing performance. And it'll be performed again by the Juneau Symphony, which they haven't announced that. So you all are the first to know, the Juneau Symphony next summer. Do you want to go to the next slide? And most of the visual artists had like a bunch of pictures of the stuff that they're doing, and because I'm a composer, I didn't really have that many, so I just threw in a few pictures here of my kind of exploration of the park. When I do these residencies, I really like to dive into the park as much as possible. And so one of my favorite things that I did was I hiked backpacked from Wheeler Peak Campground all the way to Lexington Arch, and just kind of basically went up to Wheeler Peak and then just kept going along the ridge through all of those peaks listed there, and then all the way you can see where it says to Lexington Arch. That's kind of where you exit down there. So that was a really incredible one of my favorite backpacking trips that I've ever done. Next slide. Here is if you've ever been to a Baker Lake and we're looking up at that like big wall that's right in front of you. That is what it looks like from above. Next. And then here are two of my other favorite views. This was looking at the top one, you're looking at Mount Washington on the right. And then kind of right in front of you is one of the bristlecone pine groves, and that's where the quarter tree is, the one that was on the state quarter, is in that grove. And then on the bottom was this really neat, I don't know if it really has a name, but this really cool like wall that just kind of is just kind of there. Um, and it felt kind of yeah, there's nothing else like it in that range. This kind of really cool wall. Next photo. And then here are a few photos from of the bristlecone pines that were some of my favorites. Next, so some of what I incorporated into the piece was I used electrodes. There's a way to connect electrodes to a plant, and there's an electric current that goes from one to the other. And there's a way to get music from the plants. And actually, if you I realize I'm explaining it, but the video actually explains it a little a little bit better. So, Aviva, if you could start at second 35 there.
Hello, my name is Marko Bajzer, and I'm the
30.
artist in residence here at Great.
Okay, so I should start at second 35.
Yeah, so about a quarter of the way in.
Okay, there we go.
So here I have two electrodes, and these electrodes are sending an electrical signal from one to the other, and they're mapping the changes in conductivity as the plant is photosynthesizing and moving water. So as you probably know, metal is a very good conductor of electricity. Rubber is a very bad conductor of electricity. This tree is presumably somewhere in between, but its conductivity is changing as it goes through these biological processes. And that's what my device is then mapping onto a wave and then onto a sound wave. So here's what this tree sounds like mapped onto a Dorian scale. Thanks for watching, and keep your eyes and ears open for updates as I continue to write this piece and have it performed. Thanks.
So yeah, there's a little bit about the process. So the piece was called The Sacrifice of Prometheus. And it was about the story of Prometheus, which, as you may know, was the oldest known living non-clonal tree in the world before it was inadvertently cut down in the 60s. And the piece sort of tells the story of a park visitor who is, camping and is sort of, wakes up in the middle of the night, um, unzips their tent and sees this incredible night sky, Um, and there's this sort of voice in the wind that sort of draws them into the forest. And then they're in this dark forest, and then they eventually get to the bristlecone pine grove. And this sort of voice leads them to the stump of Prometheus, and then the kind of voice reveals itself as the ghost of Prometheus and asks, "What have you done to me?" Um, so it was a very kind of story to make us reflect on conservation, and think about that this sort of event was really obviously like unfortunate and unintentional. But it did also we also did learn a lot about our climate from that incident. Um, and that's why it was called Prometheus, because of all the knowledge that it gave us. It also it was a one of the factors that led to the creation of the national park, which thereby protected all of the other bristlecone pines on in the Snake Range. Um, but it's a kind of a question of, do the ends justify the means, and do we have to destroy an iron environment in order to save it, and all of the kinds of things that we care about. So let's just we can listen to a bit of this. Yeah, let's start at 1605, and then we'll go to
Hi, my name is Marko
2852,
Bajzer. I was the artist and
and then that'll be kind of the end of my time.
Okay.
And while you're getting that set up, in order to portray the voice of Prometheus, I used a solo bass oboe, which is a pretty rare instrument, and to me was just kind of like perfect to depict, the ghost of a 5,000-year-old tree. And so in this excerpt, you won't hear the sounds of the trees. That's kind of like a little bit earlier in the piece. So it's kind of like the orchestra mixing with the electronics. But yeah, so I would encourage you, and I hope that you listen to the rest of
Oh,
the piece on your
sure.
own.
Okay, sorry. I
That's
just okay, so we got a 16.
that's close enough.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, some people were asking in the chat where they can hear the whole thing. It's actually on YouTube. So I think the title of the YouTube video, and it was just put up there like a week ago, is called, I think, Reno Phil performs the world premiere of The Sacrifice of Prometheus. So I'm sure if you type in Prometheus and Reno Phil on YouTube, I can't imagine that anything else would pop up. So yeah, I know I've probably gone over a few minutes, but I promise I'll do my question and make it shorter to make up for it.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Marco. And it kind of gave me chills listening to it. It's so beautiful. And I think I could probably put the link to this
Oh
full
yeah.
video in that follow-up email as well. So thank you so much for sharing. So now we're going to go on to Megan and take it away, Megan.
Thank you. Wow, Marco, that was so powerful, really incredible. So first, I want to start off by just saying a big thank you to the foundation for offering this really wonderful speaker series to connect people to the park, and for supporting the Artists in Residence program and expanding it. And thanks to everyone for listening in tonight. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So my work is really all about patterns and connections in the natural world. I mainly work through drawings, paintings, murals, and I like to do very detailed line work. Often that's combining native flora and fauna from different habitats or with parts of their habitats. And really my intention with my work is to encourage viewers to slow down and take the time to pause and really appreciate the natural world when they're exploring public lands in different places, like Great Basin National Park. Next slide, please. So for my residency, I took part in the Winter Artist in Residence program, and I was really drawn to the remoteness of Great Basin National Park, and just I loved taking part in my program during the winter just about a year ago, and having that time to explore in the quiet stillness and just walk on the snowy trails and just be able to really be embraced by that sense of quiet. And for me, when I take part in a residency, it's time for me to get completely away from distraction and to experience the place fully. Next slide, please. And my creation process is really rooted in exploration and observation. I like to take the time to get outside, to hike around. As I mentioned earlier, looking closely at different plants and searching for wildlife. And a lot of times I'll photograph what I come across and then use these as a reference later on in the studio. Next slide, please. So this was one piece that I created during my time at the park, and it was inspired by a visit to the Lehman Caves. It's a 20 by 20 inch acrylic painting where I used acrylic medium to get a little bit of that texture in here. And this is focused on the big-eared bat. And so I filled the bat with some plants that you can find around the park, as well as moths, because these make up about 90% of the bat's diet. So I kind of hid those throughout the wings. You can see a little bit on the detail on the right there. Next slide, please. This next piece of a northern saw-whet owl is actually inspired by a hike, a full moon hike that I took that Liz Woolsey leads each month. And the month that I was there, it was the first week I was at the park, and the theme was listening. And as we were walking around, we heard this mysterious sound as we were really paying attention to the noises on this hike. And she recorded it since we weren't able to identify what it was. And when we returned, back to the bristlecone store, a park ranger was immediately able to identify it as a northern saw-whet owl. Again, this piece is also 20 by 20 inches, painted with that acrylic medium to give it a little bit of the texture on the owl and on the branch. And then I filled the owl with different plants that I encountered on my hikes. Next slide, please. So this was the big piece that I worked on throughout my residency. This is 24 by 36 inches, and it's really inspired by the life that I saw, even in the winter time when I was walking on trails and cataloging the different plants that I saw. I really wanted to highlight a lot of the life that I still saw during this time period. I also noticed a lot of animal tracks in the snow as I was walking around. And so the trails at the park are made up of some of those different animal tracks. This again was done, painted in acrylic, and the detail is all added with a fine lined acrylic paint pen. And I got to work on this kind of all over the place. I worked sometimes in my room, sometimes at the visitor center or in the Rhodes cabin area when the weather was warm enough. I also spent a couple days working at the Baker Community Center, where some of the locals were nice enough to teach me cribbage too in between painting. So it was a great opportunity to connect with visitors and with the local community. Next slide, please. So when I came to this residency, I expected at the beginning the landscape, the wildlife to be the biggest influence on me. And of course, they were all very awe-inspiring and just amazing. But I think for me, the people were the greatest impact that keep me coming back to Baker, Nevada, and to Great Basin National Park. I was at the park during a really difficult time for the community when the massive terminations of park employees were happening, and 5 probationary park staff lost their jobs. And even though this was such a difficult time for them and the community, they still went above and beyond to support me and to support the visitors to the park. And so this whole experience really inspired my current and future work to kind of change direction a bit and focus more on conservation and being more intentional with the work that I'm creating. So here I've included some of the projects that were inspired by the residency that I created after I left. So on the left-hand side is a mural that I painted up in Reno, and this highlighted different threatened and sensitive species that are sensitive to environmental changes in and around the park. I also wanted to include the Bonneville cutthroat trout because their reintroduction really shows the power of restoration efforts as well. The next image is of a Great Basin rattlesnake that I did for Candace Garlock's Honeycomb project, which is really amazing and traveling all around. And then I also received a grant from the Nevada Arts Council to come back to Baker to paint a mural. So in October, I visited and I did a collage workshop to get feedback from the community. And then I just recently returned a couple of weeks ago to paint a big-eared bat right near the community center. Next slide, please. So I just want to say it was really truly an honor to be artist in residence at Great Basin National Park. I really feel this is such an amazing special gem that we have here in Nevada, and I'm so grateful to the foundation and the park for providing me with this life-changing opportunity. So thank you so much. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Megan. And it's really fun to see your artwork up close. And it was fun for me because I saw a lot of new art that I hadn't seen yet in your presentation. So thank you so much. So now we're gonna hand it off to Mark Maynard.
Thank you, Aviva, and Marko and Megan. Thank you very much. Amazing, amazing artwork and hard to follow, but fun to follow. So thank you. Go ahead with the next slide, if you don't mind. So I came to Great Basin National Park as a literary artist, and that sort of begs the question, what do you do while you're in the park? And like Megan, I found a real connection with the people there. I also was thinking about it as really time to go be alone and write in sort of that mythologized idea we have of nature writers, of John Muir and Ed Abbey, and a lot of the great nature writers of sort of getting out there and being by yourself. It also became sort of interesting interacting with people when I would say it was the artist in residence. They'd say, "Well, what are you painting?" And it becomes this sort of visual sort of default. So that was kind of fun, and I did spend some afternoons out on the lawn of the visitors center, sitting in a chair with a little table, typing on a manual typewriter. But my initial project that I approached with, it was an idea I had of kind of archiving a moment in time of visitors to a national park and sort of capturing, thinking ahead as we look at anthropology, you know, hundreds and then thousands of years down the road, what would this moment in the summer of 2022 look like for future people? And so, if you can do the next slide. I had some tags made, and they were actually old dry cleaning tags. A company still makes those. And you can see on the bottom left there, I stamped those with the Great Basin National Park artist in residence, and that was the claim check. So anybody who gave me something for the archive got that matching claim check, and then I logged everything into this big logbook. And that was the main thing I was going to focus on. I also, in that bottom right, had a sketchbook, and people could write, they could journal in there, they could do sketches, or whatever, and then sign them. And the whole idea was to create this archive of this summer in the park. One thing that I hadn't really thought about or estimated was how many people move through Great Basin National Park and don't stay for very long. So it was harder to sort of collect these archives. It didn't go to plan, and as all the artists in the room know, um, art has nothing to do with plans other than where you get your start. So I still have some of these. I'm still working with some of these, but I also started working on a series of essays. And in a minute, I'll share an excerpt from one of the longer essays that I've done a short video of. But I started to really explore why we go to nature and why we go to national parks. And I had sort of entered that coming in with this idea of the literary artist in a looking back at it an almost selfish way as a method of escapism, to get that outside world out of my head, out of my experience, be inspired by nature, and sort of buying into that mythology of the nature writer. And through just a strange series of events, I already brought, a lot with me that summer. And it talks a little bit about that in that piece. But it's an interesting, Great Basin's interesting. It's an island, right, in the middle of an already remote state. But you do get down to Baker, and, the outside world sort of trickles into your experience. And so it really became more of a meditation of why do we go to these types of spaces? And, do we leave it all behind, or does that experience in nature just kind of reshape our outside world that is still there and present with us? So we can go to the next slide. We also did presentations while we were in the park in the amphitheater there. And so what I did is I took some of this and trying to take the idea of our visual emphasis that we have, particularly now with cell phones and photography and social media and Instagram. And so what I was trying to do is get people to think about doing photography from the perspective of a nature writer. In other words, being much more present with all five senses and really being in that moment consciously before we take pictures. I think in a way we've made with our cameras and our endless rolls of film, we've made photography a proxy for our memories of place. And I really wanted to get people to reconnect with that place before they took that picture and that maybe when they looked at that picture down the road or shared that with other people, that deeper sense of consciousness and presence and moment would come through. And in order to do that, I kind of had to try that myself. So next slide. So this was an early draft. This was on that manual typewriter of sort of this writing exercise of taking a photo like a nature writer and really consciously thinking about where you are in place and time before you hit that shutter and take that photo. And what follows here is a short essay that I created using this this concept of taking a photo like a nature writer. So if we can go to the next slide and then go ahead and hit play on that video.
Coming down the mountain. Thunder tumbles down the giant amphitheater of rock and ice, chasing me off an exposed section of trail. Scrambling down is exhilarating. Fist-sized rocks ring underfoot like grinding glass over an unseen hollow. The petrichor scent of cold rain splatters hot rocks. A pair of Clark's nutcrackers squawks at me from twisted branches, like a pair of escaped parrots. Across the valley, cauliflower thunderheads bloom as the rumble of cruising commercial airliners fades behind drumming rain. My brain races. It's been over a week that I've been eating and sleeping alone, watching the ebb and flow of the arrivals and departures in the non-reservable, first-come, first-served world of the Upper Baker Creek campground. I need to get off this high trail, be less exposed when the ionized, hypercharged air releases a squirming shaft of light and heat into whatever will lead it groundward. There's a different sense of death, too, less impending, full of grief. We come to nature to escape. We try to leave the world behind and ground ourselves in earth, air, and sky. Information doesn't flood into these thin spaces high up and away from roads and power lines. But it still seeps in, finding fissures in the crackling air, bits of cellular signal collecting in a digital basin waiting for me to glance at its glass surface. Death comes in threes. 1. A friend murdered thousands of miles away a few days ago. Another female victim of gun violence at the hands of her young son's father. 2. My best friend's rambunctious, nonverbal, special needs brother found quiet in his bed yesterday morning, a never-ending bundle of energy, finally still. 3. The accelerating decline of my mom. Her body thriving, her mind receding into the throes of dementia. Death of the mind outracing the demise of the body. The outside world can find us everywhere. Even so, this moment hangs in the air, freezes my momentum down trail. Somewhere, most likely in the highest elevations of Nevada, is the oldest living single organism in the world. Twisted, mostly bare of needles and clinging to a steep, rocky slope such as the one I stand on. Bristlecone pines can live to nearly 5,000 years old. They do so not by being lush, towerly specimens of vitality like their ancient counterparts, the giant sequoia, but instead hunched like solitary monks, move high up into the rocky soil, their stunted, twisted trunks a facade of death, as vitality slowly works its way through the specimen in the hidden flow. A large metal sign a few yards away from me in the park's Bristlecone Pine Interpretive Trail reads, in part, "Here in Great Basin National Park, their blank beauty and scientific value are particularly evident." An anonymous admirer has scratched the word grotesque from the plaque. One often has to completely walk around a bristlecone to ascertain if it's living or not. The trunks of the dead, because of the rot-resistant wood, can remain upright for thousands of years. The tragic remains of Methuselah are somewhere in plain sight, a sprawling stump of a 5,000-year-old tree that was killed by humans to determine its age. The trick to their longevity is a plodding rate of growth and a tight-grained wood that resists rot and decay. When parts of the tree are stressed or dying, the plant perseveres by relying on just a few needled branches, a section of healthy connective tissue within the heartwood, and just a few roots to feed the entire living system. As long as even the thinnest connection remains between root, heart, bark, and branch, the tree lives on, even if it appears twisted, gray, dry, and needleless as dead wood, ready to topple in the hurricane mountain winds. Gives me hope that we might find a way to thrive in similar fashion, and so I breathe in the wet air and continue to descend toward the safety of the tree line below.
That was so fun, Mark, and moving and powerful. Thank you so much for
Well,
sharing.
thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity and I just want to say this program is amazing what it does. I know for visitors, but for the artists as well. And you never quite know what it is you're going to do until you're there in the place. And so thank you, Aviva, and to the foundation for giving artists that space to work because it really does mean a lot.
Well, thank you. And I think it's really, really fun and neat that at the beginning of your project, you were taking artifacts of people and trying to, using that as some inspiration. And what turned out in that video was that artifact of the sign on the bristlecone, which it had been scratched out because that has since been removed and replaced. It was a foundation project to fund an updated signs throughout the Bristlecone Pine Loop with updated information and also, new visuals and they don't have scratch marks on them anymore. But I love that you captured that. So that was really fun.
Thank you.
We have one more artist that we will hear from before we move on to some questions and answers. So Alina, we would love for you. Let me see if I can move forward here. Give me one sec. What's going on?
Coming down the mountain.
Okay, get to the next slide. And here we are.
Hello, everyone. So I was the artist in residence during summer 2024. Currently, right now, I live in Las Vegas. I'm an MFA student at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and my work primarily consists of oil and gouache painting. And so my journey to becoming artist in residence really, I think, starts in 2019 when I took my first oil painting class by my beloved mentor, Phyllis Schaefer. And from there on, I was hooked. And I was like, okay, how can I maximize my time spent outside painting? So that's what I did. And I found out about residencies and I was like, oh my goodness, this is a thing. Like, I have to do these. So I worked and worked and worked until I got to get to be the artist in residence at Great Basin. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So plein air painting, it is kind of intense sometimes, especially at Great Basin. And luckily, I had all the knowledge I got to learn from Phyllis. But there's a lot that goes into it, practically speaking. You got to pack all of your painting gear, your panels, and then it's up to the weather, it's up to the wind, and it can be very frustrating if nothing's cooperating with you. But this is a scene from the Wheeler Peak Glacier. And I decided, I was like, I'm going to carry all my stuff up and paint this. And at the time, the park, the Wheeler Peak campground was closed. So you had to park at the trailhead pass, which is even further. So I did a lot of walking during my time there, but it was amazing. So go ahead and go to the next slide. As I began to paint more outside, I wanted to take, full advantage of my time at Great Basin and, what the location had to offer. So this is just another one of the areas. It's on the way to the Wheeler Peak Glacier, the bristlecone pines. I'm absolutely in love with all the bristlecone pines up there. They're amazing. And during my residency, I wanted to take full advantage of getting to spend all that time outside. So I was literally on a schedule of like eat, sleep, paint, repeat. And my days averaged about like 2 to 3 paintings outside. You know, I'm working smaller. I'm working from like 5x7 to like 12x16 was the largest panel I took out with me. And I would just spend the day gathering references. And usually I would stick to one trail head and then make the day of that. So I'd have a morning painting I'd spend a couple hours on and then go somewhere else, find another scene for the afternoon and work on that. So go ahead, the next slide. And so this is from the Timber Creek Trail. So the painting on the right was my morning painting. And then I hiked all the way up through the valley and I was like, oh, I have to paint this other scene. And that was my afternoon painting. So I spent, yeah, my days split between the mornings and evenings. And it was like by the end of the day, which was like probably 4 o'clock for me, I was exhausted, but not exhausted enough to go to the lectures they had at the visitor center and get to learn more about the astronomy and what else is going through with the park. Next slide. So this is also some of the joys of plein air painting, even when you're like super prepared for wind, because that will just take your setup down. And careful about everything else. I still managed to trip on this one painting, which I found really funny. And I was like, oh no, but I managed to fix it. So it's okay. It's happy now. Next slide. So during my time in 2024, I was there in September, and that coincided with the Great Basin's annual astronomy festival. And so for my part of the residency, I helped out with the night sky art programming, and we painted in red light. And if you're not familiar with the dark sky protocols, you're probably like, why is there all this red light? And that's to help with light pollution. It's to help with you being able to see the stars at night. And so in this program, it is super cool. So because you're looking at red light, everything is obviously red, but you're only seeing the value of what all the colors are. So how light, how dark something is. You can't see what color you're choosing. So the participants would choose the color not knowing what it is and draw whatever they were drawing and then get to see it the next day when they come back to the visitor center and be like, oh, I did not know I was using that color because you can't see it. So that was a lot of fun. And then go ahead and go to the next slide. And getting to spend the time at the astronomy festival and go to all the talks and then just even the talks in the evenings at the park really got me interested in the night skies. Like obviously Great Basin is like the best night sky out there, right? And I wanted to start to paint that. And obviously I'm not going to be outside at night painting the Milky Way because no. So I decided to use gouache paint, and I started this whole series of nighttime sky paintings highlighting the Milky Way, highlighting different features. So these are just two of the paintings that were highlighting Cimpress pine trees, but this is developed in a whole series across different parks at this point, and have been a really good vantage point to talk about like what is like light pollution, why is it important, you know, like the whole concept of like you should be able to step outside and see the Milky Way at night. And I don't think, at least for me, most people my age or younger, like that doesn't get through, like that's a thing, right? And being able to talk about that and the importance through paintings is what I've really come to love through Great Basin. Next slide. And luckily I get to return. This was last year. I got to go back up and teach a plein air painting workshop, and I'll get to go back up this year as well. And I'm in love with it. So thank you for everything. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alina. That was really wonderful to see your paintings and artwork and methodology up close, and for all the artists. So what we don't have that much time left in our program. We might go a few minutes over. If there is any questions from the audience, please do go ahead and put your questions in now. You can put those in the Q&A, or put it in the chat. We have a few questions that we're planning to ask, but we'll prioritize the audience questions because we do, we want to have your input and want you to all to be part of this this program together. But I'll start with a question for Marko. If you could tell us a little bit more about how you come up with your ideas for your compositions and how does your day-to-day in, when you were in the park inform that?
Yeah, so I kind of came into the residency with a vague idea of what the piece would be about. Like I knew that it would involve kind of like the night sky and like the kind of the story of the piece would be at night. Um, and then so at some point I decided like, okay, well, if it's going to be about the night sky, or if the piece is going to take place sort of at night, then I better get out there at night. So I like took a nap in the afternoon and then went outside at like 9 p.m. and then hiked the Bristlecone Grove Trail and then got back like at maybe 7 a.m. and just spent the whole night out there like listening to music. I have a whole like database of music about various like nature things, so I like put on my stargazing playlist. And that night was just so powerful to me, and also just like thinking about the Prometheus story and like all that meant. So from there, I kind of, I have these sort of, yeah, I had my story and I had like the emotions that I wanted to convey. And then, the many, many years of music school kind of informs how how those emotions are portrayable via music. And as far as my day to day, I didn't do a whole lot of composing at the park. It's kind of easier for me to do it here, in my studio. So I'm actually really just exploring as much of the park as I possibly can and also the surrounding area. Um, like in my last few days, I was living in the Wheeler Peak campground, and then at sunset, the light would shine on these mountains in the distance toward the east, and they had these like very visible stripes. Um, so I went over to that mountain range to check it out, and it was really really cool. It was a Howell Peak, and also oh, what was it called? It's actually the second tallest cliff face in the country after El Capitan in Nevada, Notch Peak. That was really cool, and the fortification range. So yeah, and then there were a couple days where it was just like raining for 3 days, and so I actually got a little bit of composing done, while there was, thunder booming overhead at 10,000 feet, which was lovely. Um, but yeah, so really just exploring the park was kind of my main mission, and then the piece took like a year and a half to write once I got home.
Wow. Wow. Really amazing. Um, So Megan, you mentioned when you were doing your presentation about how you were in the park during the terminations of the probationary employees and how that kind of affected you and impacted your residency. So do you want to talk a little bit more about how that influenced your work?
Yeah, of course. For me, it was heartbreaking to be there during that time. I was seeing people who were really passionate, very qualified, who'd worked really hard to get into these positions in such a place of uncertainty. And um, I also recognized and really saw firsthand how the terminations, they didn't just affect the park staff who lost their jobs. They really hit the park hard, and the park was already limited staff wise. So by losing even more of the staff members, the visitor experience was affected. The local community, which really relies on the tourism of the park, was affected. So it was hard to see. But as I mentioned before, despite how tough this experience was for the community, for the park staff, I was just blown away by how they still went above and beyond to support visitor experiences, to support my experience too. I mean, uh, they took me out birding, hiking. They invited me to community events. So it was just so kind to still be embraced even during this hard time. And I think seeing this dedication and really recognizing like just how important they are and all they do, even in the face of this loss, just made me realize that it's impossible to separate the park from the people who protect it. Their work is absolutely essential, and I think that's what's really inspired my current work, and also just my current life as well, just to take action. And it doesn't have to be big actions. I think I've recognized too that it can be small steps. What are the little things that I can do in my community? How can I get more involved, whether it's supporting national park foundations and friends groups? I really saw during my time there too the importance of these groups because the foundation stepped in to rehire staff so that they could perform critical park operations during this time. So, I mean, I already just absolutely love the Great Basin National Park Foundation and the park. And so that just brought you up even on another level. So it was really amazing to see. And I care so much about our public lands and about places like Great Basin National Park. And so I want to protect these places for future generations so that they can enjoy and have the same wonderful life-changing experiences that I had. And they're irreplaceable. So yeah, it just really was very impactful for me.
Thank you so much, Megan. And, I think some people might know who are in the audience tonight that, art was something that helped with creating national parks in the first place. Those artists like Thomas Moran that invigorated kind of the American experience, the desire for protection and preservation. So artists play an important role in preservation, and all of you guys here tonight are great examples of that. So let me ask Mark, let me ask you a question. I feel like you talked about how your process was different when you were at the park and how your idea kind of changed when you were there. But I'm curious to know like what you're working on now, and if there was, if the residency continued to influence your projects you're working on now.
It absolutely did. In my prior to this residency, most of my work had been in fiction. So kind of working in essay format and nonfiction was new to me. I'm a huge fan of nature writing and great authors who do it, but I hadn't done much of it. So it was a great way for me to sort of switch into genres. Since that time, I've had a few pieces published in Nevada Magazine. And around the same time, I went back to graduate school and got a journalism degree and focused on documentary filmmaking. So it really sort of, for me, became a new way of storytelling. And I think collecting those archives were really a way of collecting stories and finding the people behind those artifacts. That music at the end of the video that I filmed, all of a sudden, it's this essay I wrote about in Great Basin National Park, and here's this Celtic music. That was my experience. Is my second night. I'm in my camper and I heard that music. I was wondering if maybe I'd eaten too many mushrooms on the side of the trail or something. Why am I all of a sudden in a pub in Ireland? And I walked two campsites up and there's a Celtic group from Salt Lake City, and they had the campsite a couple of sites up, and they would just play along the creek there every night. And so I got to know them, and it was like, oh, all of these people are creating stories simultaneously as I'm doing it. And so it really, like Megan was saying, you kind of go there for the nature and the critters and the and that natural world, and you gravitate towards the people. And it's really influenced my work, and including my fiction. I have a story right now that I'm trying to get published, and it's focused on sort of public land conflicts and a lot of politics around it that we have in the West and how it's been really intensified. Megan saw that with the layoffs there, and so I do think I kind of entered the park with this idea that it's something we take from. We're going to nature. We're there to be inspired by it, and I think that the times caught up with us in a big way, and really it's I think a call for us to be activists right now more than ever. And the inspiration from those bristle cones, of that perseverance and that way of just at that thin little strip of bark they thrive, but they're also at great risk right now because of the changing climate and things like that. So it's a real wake up call. Like, when those go, what do we have? They've something that's been around for 5,000 years, and in the last 10, we're putting them at threat as a species. I think it's a big wake up call, and I think that's part of the power of art. And I think being in the park at that time was sort of a wake up call for me. Like, no, this art needs to be doing something as well.
Yeah, I really love that. I really love that idea of we're taking something, we're taking inspiration, but what are we giving? And I think, probably everyone that's in the audience tonight, and I know for sure all of our panelists feel really strongly that is important, that we are part of this process of protecting the places we love. So yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. And I think that was the question we were gonna give to Alina too, was basically that intersection of art and environmental conservation, because I know that also was a big part of the influence of your residency. If you want to speak a little bit more to that.
For sure. Like what everyone has already said is amazing and awesome. And I think we're all kind of on that track. Yeah, during my residency, I really got into the night skies and dark skies coming from Las Vegas, right? Which is one of the worst light polluted areas in the world. I'm like, oh my goodness, how can I talk more about this? But like for people to actually listen. And for me, that's through painting. And how can I educate myself on this so I can educate other people and we can have those conversations? And I think that's where like art, whether it is visual or like auditory or writing or whatever, like it provides a door and a gateway to those conversations.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alina. I know I saw in the chat, Mark, that someone was curious to know if would you be okay with me sharing your video as
Absolutely. Yeah, I
okay.
will. I'll get that to you, Aviva, and then you can share.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to turn it over now to Claire. If there is any audience questions, I have not been monitoring, but she has been doing that, and I'll let her ask those.
So the first question came up both in the Q&A and in the chat, and I'll address this to just any artist in residence that's interested in talking about it. But can you talk about the artist in residence application process, or how you became an artist in residence? The specifics of the process, but if any of you all want to talk about your process applying or what inspired you as well.
I would say as far as the specifics of the process, we've moved to being on call for entry. So maybe someone who was like more recent might want to talk a little bit about that, because I think the older artists or the not older, but the less recent ones, we had a different application process.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go for it if it's okay. So it's going to require whatever art form you do, you're going to submit a portfolio of however many images. I don't know, it's like 5 or 10, somewhere in between then. You're going to write, a statement explaining like, why do you want to come here? Like, why do you want to make art, right? So it's really important to, in that statement, convince the reader like that they want to see your art there. Am I forgetting? It's like portfolio and statement, right?
Yeah, and your resume. I can tell you from being on the jury for several years that, if there are artists in the audience that are hoping to apply in future years, we save one spot each year for a regional artist who's from Nevada or Utah. So you do get preferential treatment if you are regional. And then besides that, I think what really speaks to the jury is if you can express why Great Basin, if it looks like your application looks like it could be for any national park, you're not going to rate that well. We want to see, why do you connect to Great Basin National Park? And then how are you going to express that to visitors, to park visitors, because each one of our artists does a program at the park. And then, through your work, maybe after you leave, which you can see really well demonstrated from all of these artists, we love the idea of an artist having this opportunity to have their work informed by this experience, but then for them to continue sharing the park through their art after they leave for, hopefully years to come.
I just wanted to add really quickly something that I really appreciated about this program, and it was really clear from the beginning, is that they really do embrace and are open to all different types of genres of art. You see a lot of history of national park art, and it's been very heavily visual, often photography or fine art oriented. And when you look at that application, it really is wide open. And as a writer, a lot of times you really question, can I even apply for this? Am I even eligible? And with Marko and the music and all of that. So really do consider it, beyond just what you think of as traditional art forms. It's really open, and I really do appreciate that about this particular program.
Well, and I'll also add to that we had our first dancers and choreographers last summer, which was super fun. And we have our artists already selected for this year for 2026, and one of them again is a dancer. So yeah, performance art is coming to Great Basin as well.
Awesome. And then the only other question that I'm seeing in the Q&A, and if you all have any final questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A or the chat. But just what support does the park provide to residents?
Maybe I should answer that question. So there are two different types of residencies. There's the camping residency or the housing one. And when the artist applies, they would check a box for which they're applying for, which season, whether they're regional or not, and then whether they're applying for camping or housing. So we have I don't know, hopefully Marko and well, gosh, all of you guys, I think Meghan was in housing. So Alina and Marko, hopefully you feel like we had a good camping setup. We have a pretty sweet camping setup for folks. I know Mark brought out his little trailer, so he had his own setup. And then the winter residency, which Meghan was part of, has you're in the housing, which I remember, Meghan, you said you liked being in the dorm because you got to meet the other rangers and talk to them. Yeah, I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but
Yeah, I feel like that was a really nice way, another way to kind of connect with people and get more involved, which is really great.
Yeah. And then the other support we give kind of jointly is the park will help establish when the program is going to take place and make sure that people feel like they have the resources they need. So, hopefully everyone felt welcomed. I think the park is basically there to welcome people. And then the foundation does a lot of the background work, the logistics, just basically the organizing logistics, the supporting the jury process and whatnot. Well, I think if there's no more questions, okay, so we're at the end. I want to say a big thank you once again to our artists and also to Tamara. Thank you for being part of making this residency happen. Thank you to Great Basin National Park, to all the artists out there who have been residents in the past, and to all of you who might apply in the future. And we will send a follow-up email with more information, but we do hope you will attend. Our next virtual program is going to be quite different. It's going to be on pack rats, and you're going to learn about climate and climate science and what we've learned from, it's crazy amazing what you can learn from pack rat mittens. So we'll have kind of the lead researcher on those who is going to be doing a presentation in March. And with that, I'm going to say thank you so much for coming tonight, and thank you so much to our wonderful artists, and have a very good evening. Good night.